Okay, so I'll bring a slightly different perspective to the discussion because I'm actually not an AI expert, I'm a neuroscientist. I want to understand the brain. And I'll talk about some sets of projects and experiments that we hope to start doing soon at the Kavli Institute in partnership with other labs in Norway. And that is the idea of leveraging explainable AI to discover knowledge of brain function. So when I talk about AI algorithms, cut me some slack, right? I have to keep it a bit high level because I study the brain. But I'll just say a few things about what's meant by explainable AI. Developing it is important because we are increasingly relying on AI algorithms to influence our decision-making in a range of industries, if it's transportation or medicine or security or finance. So it's very important that we don't just trust the output of these algorithms blindly because two main reasons. Number one is they're not perfect, they can make mistakes, and the other one is that they're not designed to be understood. So ChatGPT gives you an output, it's not designed so that you can go back and ask it why. It just tries to give you the best output it can. So the idea is if we can explain and understand these algorithms, then we can know when to trust them and when not to. And so the concept behind explainability is really simple. So if we look at the top panel here, the current state of the art has it where you have an AI network that is just trained on gobs and gobs of training data. If it's pictures of cats, or if you're a medical doctor, you want to know if someone has a tumor in their lung. So the models are trained up, they acquire the statistics of the data that they're fed, they learn a function, but the thing is, the output goes in a one direction. The direction of this arrow is unidirectional. It's only going out to the user. So the user can't go back and ask, why did you do that? Can I trust you? Do you know why you made an error just now? With explainable AI, it's quite similar, but a little bit different, where you're still training up AI models, but the thing is, the networks are keeping tabs on how they do their calculations so that you can go back after the fact and query, why did you do that? So to my understanding, this is like the cake, and then the icing on the cake is this explainable model that the person can then interface with and go back and forth and understand more. So it's like the person is making the decision, but the explainable model is more influencing their decision. It's giving them suggestions instead of making the decision for the person. And so the big idea here is to make the black box of the AI model a little bit less black. And we neuroscientists love black boxes because we study brains, which is nature's original black box, right? So brains generate all kinds of codes for various remarkable things. And we spend our lives trying to understand where these codes come from and how they happen. So I'll show you a few examples. So one is the famous grid cells that were discovered in Trondheim. They got the Nobel Prize. These were recognized with the Nobel Prize in 2014. And what goes on here is that we're looking down on a 2 by 2 meter box, and the little gray line that you see in the background shows everywhere where a rat was walking in the box. The rat is walking around foraging for food, and you can record from individual neurons at a time. And so every time a neuron fires, that's one of these black dots here. And so the rat has no idea about grids or triangles or geometry or anything, and yet its brain does, right? The brain is mapping the space of the box, and theoreticians and modelers are working continuously to find out where these codes come from, how they develop, how they support navigation. Another kind of wacky, fun example I picked from the other end of the spectrum is the so-called Jennifer Aniston cells. If anyone is old enough and remembers the show Friends, she was the famous actress in there. And these are more like concept cells, right? They actually respond to, it can be famous people, someone that you know, and they were called Jennifer Aniston cells because the patient was in a neurosurgery lab, and doctors were recording from individual neurons in the patient and showing them various images, and they found neurons, or a neuron in particular, that responded to Jennifer Aniston. It didn't matter what she was wearing, or if the face was left or right or upside down. You could even just show the name Jennifer Aniston and the cell would fire. So it's like, it's encoding the concept. But the thing is, this is really abstract. Like, how in the world can you get neurons that become that specific? It's kind of incredible. And then I would be remiss if I didn't, recognize face cells, so not just Jennifer Aniston in particular, but just faces in general, and facial features like the spacing between the eyes. These so-called face cells occur in the infratemporal cortex, and again, these are being recognized with the Kavli Prize this week. So that's fine. So there's different forms of coding, but are there actually parallels between real brains and fake brains, right? Does it actually make sense to try to look at the coding that goes on in a brain made of carbon versus one made of silicone? So I'll show you a couple of examples where this was the case. So one is with so-called orientation tuning in the brain. So these are the response properties of visual cortex neurons. So this is in the back part of the brain that responds to visual input. These cells were recorded from a monkey looking at a computer screen where different orientations of lines are presented on the screen. And so this box here shows a neuron that fires selectively whenever there's diagonal stripes on the screen that are going from the top left to bottom right. Here's another nice example of a neuron that responds to lines that are going straight up and down. And this is happening in the earliest stages of visual processing. And these cells were discovered back in the 1950s. So if we jump forward in time 40 years, a pair of researchers, Olshausen and Field, published a very famous paper in the mid-1990s showing that you could train an artificial neural network to find features in natural scenes. And they found that the first stages of the network did this job by acquiring selectivity for lines and edges in the natural scene, just like what you see in visual cortex. So this was quite striking. Another example is with spatial coding. So most of what we know about spatial coding has been learned in freely running rats and mice because they can run around, they don't pull the equipment off their head, so they're very useful for studying things like spatial mapping. So here's an example of a grid cell that it's just like what I was showing you before, but the red means that the cell is very active and the blue means the cell is not active. There's also head direction cells that act like a compass. They fire when the animal is facing in a certain direction, or border cells that fire when the animal is running along certain edges of an enclosure. And now several groups, not just one group, but several groups now, including I think some people probably in the room here, have published models of artificial agents that have been trained to navigate or to map space. And indeed, people have found and reported using different architectures that spatial coding features emerge, just like what you see in a rat. You start to see it in an AI network. So things like grid cells, head direction cells, and border-like cells. And these are used by the agents when they are navigating around and trying to solve tasks. So I think it's reasonable to say that biological networks can inspire AI architectures. And what I think is particularly interesting is that if you take human or animal behavior as a model for an AI agent and you train the model to do simple behaviors, like predator-prey interactions, like if you train a bot to chase a mouse, for example, this is kind of powerful because if you can actually have it mimic the behavior, you can actually go in and completely access all aspects of the network. You can pick them apart, you can understand how they work, you can take them out and see what the thing can't do, which is very, very, very hard to do in a brain without destroying it. So it's possible to explain how a network produces a behavior, which can inform neuroscience theories. And so I think there can be a nice sort of cycle here where you can test ideas, back in the brain, inform your theories, and then try to model this with AI networks. So the big win here would be to discover shared families of rule sets or algorithms. I think this would be the big prize. Where you find the algorithms by which a real brain or a fake brain, it doesn't matter, solves a problem. What are the computations for solving a task? So in this case, both kinds of boxes become a little bit less mysterious. We gain fundamental insight into how intelligence emerges from networks, if it's biological or not. And then the applications from this could be fantastic, where you could have autonomous vehicles that can drive more carefully. I'm thinking of the predator-prey type thing, right? Where the agent learns to move efficiently through an environment. You could imagine robots that move more gracefully, and you can even have more efficient AI models themselves. So I don't think we're necessarily going to solve the brain using AI, but I think it's going to be a very, very useful tool for uncovering the principles by which it generates certain features of behavior. And I'm very excited to get going with this kind of work. So that's all I prepared. Thanks for your attention.